I took the graveyard shift at the meat-packing plant because after the way I lost my last job, I needed money fast, and I no longer trusted any supervisor who said a bad count would fix itself. At my old plant, I refused to sign off on a sanitation reset that should have failed inspection. Management wanted the line back up. I said no. They pushed me out anyway, and let the paperwork tell a cleaner story than the one I had lived through. By the time I got to Iowa, I was broke enough to take night work in a place nobody wanted to stay after midnight. The plant sat outside a small town under white yard lights and black winter sky. Loading docks on one side, refrigeration units humming on the other. Inside, it was steel rails, drain grates, bleach smell, freezer air, and fluorescent light, hard enough to make every shadow look like a mistake. On my first night, the supervisor handed me a rule sheet and told me one thing before anything else. If the count came back 1 over after 1 a.m., I was not to count it again out loud. The plant sat outside town under white yard lights and a black Iowa sky, low and wide against the frozen dark. Loading docks on one side, refrigeration units on the other, both humming hard enough to make the whole building sound awake even before I stepped inside. The parking lot was half full with pickups carrying frost on the windshield edges and engine block cords hanging down in front. My breath showed in the cold as I walked from the truck with my duffel over one shoulder. Through the employee entrance glass, I could already see fluorescent light washing out the hallway inside. That was the first lie a place like that tells. Light makes people think they can see what matters. In processing plants, the light only helps the floor look cleaner than it is. I badged through the side door, and the first thing that hit me was not the smell. It was the cold moving through the steel walls like it belonged there more than the people did. Inside, the air carried bleach, wet concrete, rubber gloves, old iron, and the sharp, dry chill that leaked out of colder sections no matter how many doors stayed shut. The locker room was half empty, metal benches, boot racks, a vending machine buzzing too loud in one corner. From farther down the hall came the sound of hose water hitting drains and the occasional clatter of something metal set down without care. My supervisor was a man named Troy Harlan, heavy coat over plant whites, knit cap pushed back, face lined in the way people get when they spend too many winters going from cold room air to parking lot wind before sunrise. He checked my badge, asked if I had worked graveyard before, and when I told him yes, just not here, he said that was probably better. Then he handed me a clipped stack of count sheets and a cheap pen with the company name on it. He spoke the way plant men do when they already know explanations come second to pace. Keep up first, ask later if there is time. He walked me through the plant fast and without much patience for awe. Processing floor, mostly shut down for the night, washdown in sections, chilled holding on the far side, cold room access by sign in only. Packaging line idle unless maintenance restarted a test section. Overhead rails ran through most of the building like a second ceiling made of narrow steel paths and quiet bad decisions. Hooks hung dark in some sections and bare in others. The drains were always the same, too clean-looking under white light, and never truly clean in the corners. Troy pointed out the red drawer in the supervisor station, the line count board, the label printer, and the cold room door at the back end of the corridor, where the floor turned noticeably colder. He told me graveyard was mostly about confirming what had stopped and catching what had not. That line sat with me because it sounded like the kind of thing a place says right before it starts making exceptions. Back in the station office, Troy gave me the rule sheet. No company letterhead, no signature, no date, just 5 typed lines that had clearly lived in too many pockets before mine. The first said if the line count came back 1 over after 1 a.m., I was not to count it again out loud. Mark the sheet and wait for supervisor confirmation. The second said if I heard the processing line restart after shutdown, I was not to step onto the floor until I saw which section was moving. The third said if the cold room door opened by itself during graveyard, I was not to go in alone. Even if I heard someone calling for help, I read that one twice and looked up at him. He did not smile. He did not act like I had reacted wrong. He only waited for me to keep reading. That told me more than any joke would have. Men do not write rules like that unless somebody already found out what happens when you skip them. The last 2 rules were worse in a quieter way. If a carcass tag printed blank, I was not to hang it back on the rail, put it face down on the steel table, and walk away. And if the same lot number appeared twice on 2 different sheets in one shift, I was not to report the second one over the radio. Fold the sheet and put it in the red drawer. I asked him who made the rules. He said night shift did, which in a plant like that meant enough people had learned the same lesson badly enough to stop arguing about it. I asked if management knew. He shrugged once. Management liked clean counts, clean logs, and clean mornings. Night shift liked staying out of rooms that got colder than they should, and not hearing the line answer back. He said the last part flat, like he was too tired to care whether I believed him yet. Then he checked the clock on the wall and told me my first count would be on Section B at 1:08 a.m. The first hour felt real in the reassuring way hard work sometimes does. I checked hose reels, confirmed shutdown on 2 sections, copied cooler numbers onto the active sheet, and followed Troy through the outer floor while he pointed out which rails still carried product after midnight and which ones should stay dead until day shift. The plant noise came in layers, refrigeration hum in the walls, drain water somewhere far down a corridor, the occasional click of metal settling overhead. Nothing in it sounded unnatural if you had ever worked around industrial systems before. That helped. So did the pace. People who have been pushed out of one bad job often calm down too fast inside the next one if the tasks make sense. I was no exception. By 12:50 a.m., I had started thinking maybe the rules were the kind of things night crews build out of repetition, accidents, and too many winters in the same hard building. Then I took the Section B count and came up 1 over. I checked the sheet first because that was habit. Line entries, hold numbers, lot marks, unit count by section, everything laid out cleanly enough to promise that the mistake, if there was one, would be mine. Then I counted the rail, again, in my head, without moving my lips. Same result. 1 extra. Not maybe. Not if I rounded something in bad light. 1 over. The overhead line for Section B should have ended 2 hooks sooner than it did. I felt the rule sheet in my pocket before I consciously remembered the wording. Do not count it again out loud. Mark the sheet and wait for supervisor confirmation. So I put a small pencil mark in the margin instead of recounting. Then I looked closer at the final section of rail and saw a tag hanging from 1 unit near the back curve. White tag stock, plant print format, no text on it at all, just a blank rectangle moving almost not at all in the cold air under the fluorescent lights. That blank tag got my attention faster than the wrong count had. Count errors happen. Paper gets dirty. Hands get tired. Numbers drift if the shift before you cuts a corner and leaves you the cleanup. But tags do not print blank in a plant like that unless the machine jams. And this one was hanging clean on the unit clip like it belonged there. I stepped closer without stepping fully onto the floor section beneath the rail. The tag swayed once and settled. White, empty, no lot number, no weight line, no date, nothing. Just clean stock where the system should have given it identity. I pulled the sheet in my hand up against the rail section and checked the final listed unit again. The paperwork stopped before the blank tag. The line did not. Then the label printer in the station behind me chirped once, and when I turned, a second blank tag was curling warm out into the tray. For 1 second, I had the ugly, strong feeling the plant was getting ahead of the paperwork on purpose. I took the new blank tag and laid it face down on the nearest steel table, exactly like Rule 4 said. That felt stupid, right up until the moment I looked back at the rail. The hanging blank tag was gone, not torn off, not flipped over, gone. In its place was only the same last section of overhead line with one too many units on it, and no paper answer for the extra one. Troy came over when he heard the label printer and took in the sheet, the pencil mark, and the face-down tag on the table without asking me to explain in order. He checked the line once, then the sheet, then the wall clock, 1:09 a.m. He nodded like a man confirming weather he had hoped not to get, and told me I had done the right thing by not recounting. I asked him what exactly I was looking at. He said if the count stayed wrong after 1 a.m., the useful question was never what the extra one was. It was whether the line had noticed me noticing it. The rest of that first hour did not calm me down the way real work usually does. I kept moving because moving was better than standing under those lights waiting for the line to prove something else. Troy had me check the washdown corridor, confirm 2 cooler entries, and update the hold sheet for a short section near packaging. All normal, all useful, but every time I heard the overhead rail tick somewhere in the plant, I felt the wrong count waiting in the next room like a problem that had already chosen me. At 1:34 a.m., I went back to Section B with Troy beside me and took the count again in silence. Same result, 1 over. No blank tag hanging now, no extra line item on the sheet, just the rail and the units on it, and one place where the paperwork stopped before the steel did. Troy marked the margin himself this time, and told me not to let my eyes start looking for shape. I asked what that meant. He said the extra one got easier to see once men started helping it. That sentence stayed with me because I knew exactly what kind of workplace warning it was. Not mystical, practical, like telling somebody not to name a crack in concrete until the engineer gets there. Because once the crew starts acting like they understand a failure, they stop respecting what the failure can still do. Around 1:52 a.m., I was in the station office checking lot numbers when the processing line restarted somewhere beyond the shut sections. Not a full start, just one sudden mechanical run of chain and wheel noise from deeper in the floor, enough to wake the whole building for about 4 seconds. Every part of me wanted to step out and see what had moved. Rule 2 stopped me first. If you hear the processing line restart after shutdown, do not step onto the floor until you see which section is moving. So I stayed where I was and looked through the office window toward the overhead rails. Nothing near us. Then, farther down the plant, one section over the cold side began moving alone. It was subtle at first, a slow pull on the overhead line near the turn before the chill room corridor, metal moving with that smooth, ugly certainty machines have when something has already engaged upstream. No one was on that section, no forklift, no maintenance crew, no restart order. I stayed off the floor and watched the rail instead of the units hanging from it, because Troy had been clear about shape. The section moved about 6 feet, stopped, then gave one last short jerk, like slack taking up at the end of a bad decision. Only then did Troy step out from the side office where he had been checking a form and tell me to follow him no farther than the yellow line. We went to the edge of the floor together. The rail had stopped again. What had changed was the count marker board clipped near the section. Someone had moved the hook number plate one position down. No one had touched it in front of us. Troy did not swear or act surprised. He only wrote the time down and told me that on Graveyard the line sometimes liked to correct its own paperwork first. If he had said that to me in daylight, in any other plant, I would have assumed he was half joking or fully burned out. At 2:07 a.m., under those lights, with the rail still faintly ticking above us, and the wrong count sitting in my notes, it landed differently, not as explanation, as survival language. We spent the next 20 minutes on real tasks again, and I noticed Troy did that on purpose. He kept the pace up whenever the plant tried to get personal too early. Cooler entry, drain check, sign-in log, hose shut off. It was almost enough to make the restart feel like some ugly plant glitch until the label printer chirped again. A third blank tag. It came out warm and curled onto the tray like the others. I did not need the rule this time. I took it straight to the steel table and set it face down without looking at the line first. Troy nodded once, which in that building was as close as men got to praise. Then the cold room door at the far end of the corridor opened by itself. It did not slam. That would have been easier. It just gave with a slow hydraulic sigh and drifted inward a few inches until the colder air inside started spilling out into the corridor. The cold room sat at the back of the plant, where the floor already felt harder and more industrial. Steel doors, white walls, drains clean enough to look hostile. Nobody had signed in on the board outside it. Nobody had walked past us to open it. Still, there it was standing ajar, with thin white chill coming off the threshold. Rule 3 hit immediately. If the cold room door opens by itself during Graveyard, do not go in alone, even if you hear someone calling for help. I was still looking at the door when a voice from inside said, not loud but clear, "Hey, can somebody get this?" Male voice, mid-distance, normal enough to be dangerous. Troy put a hand flat against my chest before I had fully realized I had shifted my weight toward the door. He did not say anything. He did not need to. We waited. That was the ugliest part of the rule and the hardest to obey. Normal plant logic says a voice in a cold room gets immediate response because cold rooms are where seconds matter if someone is hurt or locked in wrong. But wrong places survive by making your best instincts look negligent if you do not understand the trap. The voice came again from inside. Same tone, not shouting, more annoyed than scared now. "Can somebody get this door?" Troy still did not move. He only reached past me and signed the wall clock time onto the back of the count sheet. About 10 seconds later, the voice stopped. The cold room stayed open. We went to the sign in board together. Empty. No name. No entry time. Then Troy keyed the radio and called for Marcos from maintenance to meet us at the cold room with a witness. Not urgency. Witness. That word told me almost as much as the rules had. A place like that had gone beyond safety by then. It was managing proof. Marco showed up fast in a coat over his plant whites, hairnet still on, wrench in one hand, expression already bad enough to tell me the cold room was not new to him. The three of us went in together. The room was colder than the corridor by a kind of cold that makes sound thinner. Steel rails overhead, storage bays in rows, white vapor hanging low near the floor. Nothing human inside. No worker, no cart, no dropped tool. No reason for the door to have opened. One rail bay on the far side, though, was marked occupied on the hanging section board, even though the space itself stood empty. I checked twice, because the eye wants to blame fog and distance in a room like that. Empty bay. Occupied mark. Wrong in the same exact way the line count had been wrong. Marco saw it too, and muttered something about the board doing that again. That again mattered. Troy wrote the bay number down, then looked at me, and said the extra one liked colder parts of the plant, because fewer men argued with themselves in there. Back in the corridor, the count board still showed one over on Section B, and now the cold room chart showed one occupied bay with nothing visibly in it. 2 systems wrong in the same direction on the same night. I took my own notebook out after that, not the company sheet. My own, small spiral pad from the truck glove box, cheap paper, clean enough to trust more than plant forms under those lights. I wrote the Section B margin note, the blank tag times, and the cold room bay number. Troy saw me doing it and did not tell me to stop. That was important. Good supervisors do not mind a second record when the first one has started getting ahead of reality. Around 2:31 a.m., the line stayed quiet long enough that I started hating myself for how hard I was listening to it. Then one of the other graveyard workers, a woman named Bry, who handled washdown checks, came into the station and asked if the count had gone wrong on B again. She did not ask if. She asked if again. Bree looked like every plant worker who has been on nights long enough to stop wasting facial expression on things that do not keep you safe. Hooded sweatshirt under the plastic outer layer, hairnet pushed back on brake, boots carrying wet floor grit. She checked the margin mark on the sheet and the face-down blank tag on the steel table and said she was glad it had started with count before voice. I asked what that meant. She said men did worse once they heard it talking to them before the sheets went wrong. Then she pointed at the red drawer and said if the same lot number doubled later, I was not to let anybody with a radio make it official. I asked if that had happened to her. She shrugged once and said it had happened to men who did not work there anymore. Then she added the detail that finally made the whole thing feel more than wrong and closer to personal. She said the extra one always leaned toward whatever section a new man was already afraid to sign. At 2:58 a.m., I found out what she meant. The sanitation release printer at the station kicked on by itself and started feeding out a sheet, even though nobody had entered a washdown completion. I took it while it was still warm. The line item at the top named the same section from my old plant where I had refused sign-off 8 months earlier. Not this Iowa plant, not our section naming, the old code from the job that had pushed me out. For 1 second the whole office felt farther away than it should have, like I was standing in another building under another supervisor with the same old pressure about to come down in a cleaner voice. Troy took the page from my hand before I could read more and folded it once, then put it in the red drawer without a word. That was my first real proof The plant had stopped being generally wrong and started selecting what kind of wrong would get under my skin. Then, from deeper in the floor, beyond the cold room side, the processing line started again, longer this time, and whatever section was moving, it was coming closer. The sound came up through the plant in stages, chain first, then wheel noise, then the hard little metal hits that tell you something has started moving farther down the line than it should. I stayed where I was because Rule 2 still held. Do not step onto the floor until you see which section is moving. This time, I did not have to wait long. The rail over the cold side started feeding forward in a slow, steady pull. Not full production speed, just enough to make every hook and hanger wake up one after another under the fluorescent lights. Bree stopped in the doorway, with her hood still half on, and watched it with the same expression she might have used for a storm rolling in over a flat field. Troy went to the yellow boundary line, and no farther. None of us stepped onto the floor. The section kept moving until one unit came around the turn near the cold room corridor and stopped exactly beneath the station camera. There was a blank tag hanging from it, nothing printed, nothing clipped above it on the sheet. That was the first time the extra one had given itself a clear place instead of just a wrong number. I could see the tag. I could see the unit. What I could not do was make it belong to the paperwork. Troy checked the count sheet. Bree checked the rail board. I checked the label machine tray. All three told the same story in different ways. It was there. It was not logged. The blank tag moved lightly in the colder air coming from the corridor, and turned enough once for me to see there was writing on the reverse side. Not printed text. Handwriting. Thick block letters, black marker, one line only. Accepted for release. My throat tightened hard enough to hurt. That was plant language from my old job. Almost word for word, the kind of pressure phrase management had wanted me to live under. Bree saw the writing too, and said not to touch it. I had not planned to. Some part of me still wanted to. That was worse. Troy opened the red drawer then, which told me more than anything he said. Men do not keep a separate drawer for wrong paperwork, unless the wrong paperwork has already taught them not to mix it with the rest. Inside were folded sheets, old printer slips, yellowed notes, and a few blank tags laid face down in a stack, like playing cards nobody wanted to turn over. He took one folded page from near the back and gave it to me. The useful line was underlined twice. If the extra one reaches a sign-off point, do not clear the sheet to make the line stop looking wrong. That was the whole trap in one sentence. The plant did not just want to be feared. It wanted to be administratively corrected. It wanted the exact kind of worker who hates loose paper and unresolved counts. I folded the page back and handed it to him. Then the line gave one short jerk, and the extra unit moved another 3 feet closer to the station table without any one of us touching a control. After that, the pace of the night changed. Before, the plant had been wrong in spots. Now, it was pushing. The extra one stayed under the camera long enough to force a decision out of every bad instinct in the room. Count it. Tag it. Sign it. Reassign it. Make it make sense before day shift walked in and asked why Section B had gone strange. Instead, we did the opposite. Troy shut the active printer lid, Bree turned the station clipboard face down, and I copied the time and rail position into my own notebook by hand. No radio call, no plant form, no spoken recount, It felt wrong in the way the best survival rules often do. A place that ugly makes you feel irresponsible the second you stop feeding it the language it wants. At 3:14 a.m., the cold room door opened again by itself. This time, the voice from inside was not unknown. It was my old supervisor from the other plant telling me to quit stalling and clear the release. That nearly got me, not because I thought the man himself was in Iowa, because the tone was exact. Tired authority, low pressure on the surface, the kind of voice that assumes you will help him because helping him makes the room feel easier for everyone. Quit stalling and clear the release. I had heard that in one form or another too many times in my life. Troy put a hand on the cold room handle before I could move and held it shut, even though the latch had already failed. He looked at me once and said, "If the voice knows your shortcuts, it is already past trying to scare you." That line did more for me than comfort would have. It made the problem practical again. Bree checked the sign and board. Still blank. No one in the room on paper. The voice came once more from inside. Same tone, now a little impatient. "We need this gone before first shift." I stepped back on purpose so I would feel my own body choosing not to answer. Marcos came back with the second maintenance man, and the four of us entered the cold room together this time. Empty again in the ordinary visual sense. No worker, no dropped pallet, no body. But the occupied bay number from earlier had changed. Now 2 bays were marked filled on the wall chart, while only one visibly held product. The second empty bay sat farther down the rail, under the colder vent line, where vapor always hung thicker. I could not see anything in it. I could see the tag clip moving, not a hook, not product, just the little tag clip, ticking lightly, as though weight on the line, beyond sight, had shifted once and settled. Marcos wrote both bay numbers on his glove with a marker instead of touching the wall chart. When I asked why, he said, because the wall liked being right too much after 2 a.m. That was the first time anyone besides Troy had said something in that building that sounded truly insane and completely earned. Back at the station, the duplicate lot number finally appeared. Same lot code on the active count sheet and on a secondary cooler transfer slip that should have belonged to an older frozen batch already moved out 2 days earlier. Same number, 2 papers, 1 shift. Rule 5 reached me before the panic did. Do not report the second one over the radio. Fold the sheet and put it in the red drawer. So I folded it and slid it in without saying the number. Bree watched me do it and nodded once. Then she told me the part none of the typed rules had said plainly. The extra one got stronger every time somebody tried to line its paperwork up across departments. Floor, cooler, sanitation, release. If enough sections agreed on it, it stopped being extra and started being expected. That was the whole horror laid bare in plant language. Not a monster, not a ghost, an exception trying to become standard issue before dawn. I hated how much sense that made. At 3:41 a.m., the line restarted again, longer than before, and on more than one section. The cold side moved first, then the outer rail near packaging, then the overhead chain by Section B with the same ugly, smooth certainty, as if something upstream had already committed to a route. The extra unit began traveling, not fast, worse than fast, steady. It passed the station camera and moved toward the exact sign-off point where release decisions got made before day shift inherited a mess. We could all see it now. Blank tag, no sheet entry, unit physically present enough to force any decent worker to think in terms of containment and paperwork. I understood the trap completely in that moment. The plant wanted to walk me to the same old edge in a new building. Just sign it. Just clear it. Just keep the next shift from dealing with your stubbornness. Troy said not a word. He did not need to. He knew I already recognized the shape of the knife. That was when the supervisor pressure came in from above. Not Troy. Production. The overnight plant manager called the station and asked why the release section was still unresolved and why the line status had not been cleaned up for morning report. Troy answered in flat, practical terms. Count discrepancy under review. No sign-off yet. The manager asked if he understood what day shift would do to them if the board was still red at 5 a.m. I knew that voice, too. Different man, same species as the last plant. Numbers first. Truth, if there is time, and there is never time. Troy told him there would be no false clear on Graveyard, and hung up before the conversation could become persuasion. That did something for me. Sometimes the thing a bad place needs most is one other person refusing the polished option in front of you. The extra unit kept moving, one section at a time, toward the release point where the steel table sat waiting under too much white light. At 3:58 a.m., the blank tag printer ran again. One fresh white tag curled out warm and empty and dropped onto the tray. Then a second did the same. I picked neither of them up. Bree did not either. We all knew by then that the plant was shifting from offering one bad entry to building enough paperwork around it that a tired worker might choose the smallest wrong move just to stop the pages from multiplying. Then the old sanitation release printer spat out a form with my previous plant code at the top and my old employee ID already entered in the approval field. That was the hardest hit of the night so far, because it was no longer only the room or the line or the count. It was my exact old administrative shape being laid out for me to step back into, clear it, and move on. I looked at the form, then at the extra one nearing the release table under the rail, and understood something ugly and useful. The final third of the night was not going to be about stopping the line. It was going to be about refusing to clean it. Once the old plant code and my employee ID showed up on that release form, the Iowa floor stopped feeling like a new job entirely. It felt like every bad room I had ever stood in after midnight, just colder and with more steel over my head. The extra one was almost at the release point now, close enough that any normal supervisor would have been asking for a decision every 30 seconds. Troy did the opposite. He shut the office door, turned the radio volume down, and told Bree to keep the live board faced away from the hall. That was the first time I understood how much of Graveyard survival there depended on reducing what could be made official too fast. The plant could move rail, print tags, and make a line look ready. It still needed a person to agree that ready meant real. I looked at the form with my old employee ID and realized the whole building had been steering toward one thing since 1 a.m. Not fear, not proof, a familiar signature on the wrong line. The line stopped just short of the release table and stayed there, humming through the structure in a way that felt almost polite. The extra unit hung under the white lights with the blank tag moving slightly in the cold air. Nothing about it looked dramatic enough to deserve what it was doing to all of us. That was part of the ugliness. Bad things in industrial spaces rarely glow or growl. They simply occupy the exact place where responsibility gets assigned. Bree took a folded page from the red drawer and let me read the underlined sentence in the middle. If the extra one reaches release, do not move the rail. do not clear the board, and do not let the pressure above you become part of the count. I read that twice. Then the station phone rang. Not the radio, not the manager line. The old landline on the wall hardly anybody used. Troy picked it up, listened 2 seconds, and hung it back up without speaking. I asked who it was. He said it had asked if Section B was finally clean. That call should have rattled me more than it did. By then, the plant had already found my language and used it well enough that a clean question was just another tool in the box. What mattered more was how close everything was getting to day shift. In a place like that, dawn is its own kind of pressure. People start wanting the floor to make sense because more witnesses are coming, more clipboards, more departments, more people who will help by aligning forms, correcting counts, and asking why a problem wasn't closed before they arrived. Around 4:12 a.m., the overhead lights in Section B dimmed once and came back stronger, and the line gave a single short pull that moved the extra one right to the release mark. The blank tag brushed the steel table edge and settled. A second later, the printer kicked out another release sheet with my old employee ID already filled in, and one line of text where the lot description should have been. Clean enough to move. I actually laughed once when I saw it. That was how exact the plant had gotten. I laughed because that phrase was the whole old lie. Not just from one supervisor, not just from one plant, but from every industrial room that ever put schedule over truth and dressed the decision in practical language. Clean enough to move, safe enough for now, good enough for this shift. The plant was no longer trying to frighten me with something unknown. It was trying to get me to agree with a sentence I already knew too well. Bree saw that same line and swore softly under her breath. Troy took the new sheet, folded it once, and set it on the red drawer without putting it in. That was deliberate. He was leaving the choice visible, not because he wanted me to make it fast, but because Graveyard had no other way out of the night except through the exact point where a worker either kept the bad count unresolved or made it belong. Outside the office window, the release section sat still under white light, and the extra one looked like every other unit on the rail except for the blank tag. At 4:21 a.m., the cold room door opened again. No warning this time, just the sound of the latch giving and the heavier cold moving into the corridor. Then the voice came from inside, and now it was my own. Calm, tired, practical, the voice I use when I have already decided the argument is over and want everyone else to catch up. It said, "The line is waiting on you." That hit harder than my old supervisor's voice had because it stripped away the excuse that somebody else was pressuring me. The worst decisions in working life do not always come from shouting bosses. Sometimes they come from the version of you that has already accepted being useful to the wrong thing. I stayed where I was. Troy did too. Bree shut the station door to cut some of the cold out of the room without breaking line of sight to the rail. The voice came once more from the cold room, still in my tone. Just sign it. Then the overhead rail by release shifted 1 inch and stopped. That tiny movement did more than a full restart would have. It was a nudge, a reminder. The plant was telling me it could wait as long as I could, because it had built the whole scene around the part of me that hated leaving the wrong thing for daylight. The manager called again at 4:28 a.m., and this time he did not even pretend patience. He wanted the board green before first shift, and wanted to know why release was still blocked if there was already a printed sheet sitting at the station. Troy said there was no valid sheet. The manager said the printer said otherwise. That line told me everything. He had not seen the extra one. He had only seen paper. That was how bad systems survive. The form reaches authority before the truth does. Troy hung up on him too. Then he looked at me and said the one thing I probably needed more than advice. He said if I signed it, the plant would not stop wanting more. That cut through everything else because it turned the choice back into plain labor logic. Bad clearances teach bad rooms what works. At 4:36 a.m., the duplicate lot number appeared again on 2 live sheets at once, one in the count stack and one in the cooler transfer tray. Same number, same shift, same exact trap Rule 5 had warned about. I folded the cooler sheet without reading it twice and put it in the red drawer. That felt better than it should have, which told me I had finally started working against the plant instead of inside its preferred rhythm. Bree took the warm blank tag from the printer tray and set it face down on the steel table beside the first one. 2 blank tags now, 2 folded duplicate sheets in the drawer, 1 extra one on the release point waiting to be made official. The room looked less like an office and more like a place where Graveyard had learned to quarantine morning lies. Then, from farther down the floor near the washdown corridor, I heard another worker call my name. Not one of ours, not anybody on shift. The voice belonged to a man from my old plant who had watched me get pushed out and said nothing while it happened. That was new, and it was nasty in exactly the right way. Not because it was louder or uglier than the rest, but because it shifted the pressure from supervisors and paperwork to silence and humiliation. He called my name again from the corridor and said the line had to move. His voice sounded the same as it had 8 months earlier. Tired, careful, not cruel enough to excuse himself with. I did not answer. The plant had found another way in, but the method had not changed. It was still trying to get me to believe that helping the system now would be cleaner than leaving it wrong. The overhead rail clicked once above the release section. The extra one was still there. Blank tag. No printed identity. Wrong count waiting for the neat hand that would make it standard. I looked at the steel table, the face-down tags, the folded sheets in the red drawer, and understood what the final choice was going to be. Not stop the line, not open the cold room, just refuse to let the wrong count become a clean record before dawn. By 4:44 a.m., the first hints of day shift were already pressing at the edges of the plant. Doors farther down the hall, locker room metal clanging, people arriving who still expected the board to mean what it said. This was the hardest part of the whole night, not the voice, not the cold room, not the moving rail. The ordinary people coming in with ordinary assumptions, ready to trust whatever had been left neat enough for them. Troy killed the active board display completely. Bree shut the printer lids and pulled the power cords. I took the release sheet with my old employee ID on it, folded it twice, and put it in the red drawer with the rest. Then I shut the drawer hard. The extra one remained on the rail. The count remained wrong. The board stayed dark. Nothing in me enjoyed that. It went against every trained work instinct I had. But ugly truth left unresolved was still better than a false clear handed forward as fact. The plant had finally pushed me to the exact place it wanted, and all it got was a closed drawer. At 4:52 a.m., the line made one final move. Not a run, not a restart, just a long, quiet release of tension through the overhead rail. Like the whole system had decided to let something go it no longer had a path for. The extra one slid 3 inches, then 6, then rolled backward past the release mark on its own slow momentum until it came to rest just outside the sign-off point. No one touched a control. No sheet was cleared. No tag was rehung. The cold room door shut at the same moment with a dull, heavy seal that sounded almost satisfied. Then the count board in the station, still dark on its face, clicked softly from inside and reset the Section B tally down by 1. Bree checked the paper stack. Troy checked the line. I checked the rail. The extra one was gone, not moved farther down. Gone. The count had settled back to normal without ever making the plant explain itself. That was the first useful thing the building had done all night. It had stopped trying once it realized nobody was going to help it clean the books. Daylight should have made the plant feel ordinary again. It did not. It only made it easier for everyone else to pretend nothing had happened. First shift came in with fresh gloves, cleaner boots, and the usual hard morning habit of trusting whatever the board looked like before coffee. Section B was normal on paper. The release point was clear. The printers were back on. Nobody asked why the red drawer was locked. That was the part that stayed with me all day, not the extra one disappearing. The way ordinary operation closes around a bad night, if the bad night leaves no clean form behind. I should have walked away then. Instead, I came back for the next graveyard because rent was due, because jobs like that do not let a man leave as fast as his nerves tell him to, and because some ugly part of me wanted to see whether the plant had learned anything from being refused. That was my mistake. Bad places always learn. The only question is what they learn from. Troy had a new yellow legal pad waiting when I came in. He did not mention the reset count from the night before. He only said one thing before handing me the first stack of sheets. If the plant gives the extra one a different route tonight, do not mistake that for surrender. That told me enough. The shape might change, but the pressure would not. The first hours stayed clean. Too clean. Washdown reports lined up. Cooler transfers matched. No blank tags. No line restart after shutdown. Bree said that was sometimes worse because the plant liked to make a man think the problem had moved on before it came back in a form that fit him better. Around 12:43 a.m., the sanitation release printer kicked on without command and fed out a single sheet. Not a release form this time. A contamination exception note from my old plant. Same header, same code, same manager initials from the night I refused sign-off and got buried for it later. It was not asking me to clear the line now. It was reminding me what happened when I did not. That was smart in a mean way. Fear of making the wrong thing official had gotten me through one night. Now the plant was leaning on the other side of the same wound, what it had cost me before to refuse. Lost job, lost pay, lost reputation, men who said nothing while it happened, supervisors who protected the cleaner story. The old note lay warm in the printer tray, like it had crossed state lines and 8 months just to find me. Bree reached it first and turned it face down before I could read more than the initials. Then she wrote the time on my notebook instead of the plant pad and told me not to let the building choose which version of my past I was afraid of that night. That line did more for me than comfort would have. A good warning narrows the room back down to one practical thing. The practical thing was simple. Whether the plant threatened me with punishment or with pressure, it still wanted the same result. A signature, a count, a cleaner morning. At 1:09 a.m., the count went wrong again, but not on Section B. This time it was the cold side transfer count, 1 over on a line that should have been dead until 5 a.m. That mattered because it meant the extra one had changed its route. Same plant, different approach. I marked the sheet and did not recount aloud. When Troy confirmed the number, he did not even check Section B. He went straight to the cold room corridor and looked at the sign in board first. Empty. Then the overhead bay chart. One occupied mark too many. Then the rail. We could not see the extra one from the corridor angle. Only the wrong bay on the chart, and one blank tag hanging farther inside, where no product should have been waiting. The cold room door opened on its own before we got there, and a wave of freezer air came into the hall, sharp enough to make my eyes water. No voice at first, just the cold. Then, from deeper in the room, my own voice said one sentence in the tone I used when I was trying to talk myself into being practical. You already know what refusing costs. That almost worked because it was true. The reason most people get broken by institutions is not that they do not know right from wrong. It is that they know exactly what the price of right can be. Troy shut the cold room door again, without letting it widen past his arm, and called Marcos from maintenance and Bree from washdown to witness with us before anyone entered. That had become the graveyard answer to everything. More eyes, fewer words, no one alone with the shape the plant preferred. When we went in together, the cold room chart was wrong in 2 places now. One extra occupied bay on the wall, and one missing bay where real product should have been. The blank tag hung from the extra position. On the floor beneath it sat a folded sanitation packet in a clear sleeve, exactly the kind of packet I had once refused to sign. I did not touch it. Bree did not either. Marcos only looked once and said the room had started laying things out instead of just printing them. That meant escalation, whether any of us wanted to say the word or not. Back at the station, Troy opened the red drawer and let me see what was inside, fully for the first time. Not just folded duplicate sheets and face-down tags. There were old release notes, copied exception forms, handwritten count slips, and 3 clear sleeves like the one on the cold room floor, each holding a document from some previous worker's weak spot. One was a safety override. One was a cooler variance. One was a maintenance clearance with half a signature on it. That was when I understood the drawer was not only a quarantine, it was a record of the exact moments night shift had refused to let the plant make a bad route official. The extra one did not always come the same way. It came through whatever paper a given worker was most likely to obey. For me, it was sanitation and release. For someone else, it had been maintenance or safety. The originality of the plant was not in the extra one itself. It was in how precisely it tailored the paperwork to the person it wanted. At 1:52 a.m., the line restarted after shutdown on 3 sections at once. Not full speed, not enough to look like production, but enough to wake every rail and hanger from the cold side to release. Bree swore softly. Troy did not. He just turned the live board off before any day shift data could begin populating from the movement. The extra one was on the move again, and this time we did not have to guess where it was headed. The rail map in the station had one blinking transfer indicator near the release point, not because anyone keyed it in, but because the plant was now trying to feed its own route into the board. I watched the overhead line pass the station camera, one hook at a time, until the blank tag came into view again. Behind it, clipped to the rail hanger, was the clear sleeve from the cold room. The sanitation packet was riding in on the line, with the extra one, as if the building had decided the whole argument would be easier if it physically delivered the paperwork to my hand. That was the ugliest move of the whole story. because it removed the last little excuse that this was only a line problem or only a count problem. Now the plant was staging a complete work moment for me, the extra one at release, the sign-off packet attached, supervisor pressure coming in from above, day shift due soon. Everything a tired plant worker needs to tell himself that clearing the sheet is the mature option. The manager called again at 2:03 a.m. and wanted to know why the release status was still dark if the line had already fed. Troy put him on speaker by accident or on purpose. I still do not know. And let me hear him say the sentence that proved the plant was reading us through ordinary hierarchy now. If it is at release, somebody owns it. That is how institutions think. If the thing exists at the point of responsibility, then responsibility must already be assigned. I knew then exactly what I was up against. Not a haunting that wanted fear, a workplace logic that wanted a name under the wrong box. I took the sanitation packet off the rail without opening it and set it face down on the steel table beside the blank tags. That was the first direct physical move I had made against the plant all night, and I made it only because I understood the difference by then between moving evidence and validating it. I was not opening the packet. I was not reading the lines. I was not signing anything. I was removing the invitation from the route it had chosen. The line ticked once in the overhead steel and stopped. For 1 second, the whole room held still. Then the old landline rang again. Troy did not answer it. Neither did I. It rang 3 times and stopped. A second later, the line printer ran and produced a new release sheet with no header at all, just the plant logo, my old employee ID, and 1 line in the center. If you leave it wrong, day shift wears it. That almost got me harder than all the rest. Not because it frightened me, because it tried to turn refusal into selfishness, and that is how workplaces trap decent people. I looked at that line and felt the whole old life try to reassemble itself inside me. The impulse to make the mess disappear before someone else pays for it. The reflex to accept a smaller wrong now to avoid a louder wrong later. That is how contaminated institutions keep functioning. They find the person with enough conscience to feel responsible and enough damage to doubt his own line. Troy saw it on my face and said one thing: day shift can refuse too. That broke the pressure cleanly enough for me to breathe again. He was right. I had been acting like I was the last decent worker on earth, which is exactly the delusion bad systems count on. I folded the new sheet without reading it twice and put it in the red drawer. Then I shut the drawer hard, powered down the line printer, and left the extra one hanging at release, uncounted, unsigned, and officially ownerless. That was when the cold room door opened again. And this time the voice from inside was not mine or my old supervisor's. It was Troy's, calling me into the room in the exact tone he used when something on the floor really mattered. That was the closest the plant came to getting me after I understood it. Troy's voice from the cold room hit harder than the others because it reached for the one thing the whole night still depended on: trust between the few people in that building who were refusing it together. He had called my name in exactly the tone he used when a line issue crossed from strange into dangerous. For half a second, I was already turning. Then I saw the real Troy, standing 3 feet to my left by the station desk, one hand still flat on the red drawer, eyes already on me because he knew what I had heard. That saved me. Not reason, not bravery, just one living witness in the right place. The voice came again from the cold room, sharper now, telling me to move. Troy said nothing. He only shook his head once. I stayed where I was. A second later, the cold room door eased halfway shut on its own. Not fast, just slow and disappointed, like a room adjusting when the wrong man failed to walk into it. The line over release gave one long metallic complaint after that, and then settled. The extra one still hung there under the white lights. Blank tag, no identity, no owner. The sanitation packet face down on the steel table where I had left it. Everything about the scene was still designed to make a worker think action would be cleaner than waiting. That was the whole game. Make the unresolved thing look less responsible than the wrong resolution. At 2:27 a.m., the manager called again, and this time Troy did not answer at all. He unplugged the station phone from the wall and set the dead receiver beside the folded sheets. Bree powered off the board display completely. Marcos turned the maintenance channel volume down until the radio was barely more than static. We were not hiding from a threat. We were starving a rout. No clean calls, no clean count, no clean response, just the extra one sitting at release with no path into daylight paperwork except the one we refused to give it. The next pressure came from the line itself. At 2:39 a.m., the overhead rail started moving again, not toward release this time, but away from it. Slow, inching motion, just enough to make the hangars knock once every few feet as the chain took up slack. The extra one moved with the rail for 6 feet, stopped, then rolled backward against the flow, as if the line and the weight on it had stopped agreeing about direction. I had never seen anything like that in any plant, haunted or not. Steel systems do not like ambiguity. Weight goes where the line takes it or it comes off. This did neither. It hung there in disagreement with the movement around it. Bree whispered that the extra one had started losing its section. That phrase was ugly and perfect. If the plant could not get it signed, counted, or routed, then maybe it could no longer keep it placed. The blank tag twisted once and showed its back to me. The marker line accepted for release was gone now. In its place, new writing had bled through in the same thick block hand, still waiting. That was the meanest line of the night because it turned all our refusal into a test of endurance. Not just one decision, hours of not helping. The building wanted one tired concession, one neat little act of labor from the person most built to give it. Around 3:04 a.m., the old sanitation printer came back to life, even though I had powered it down. It fed out one last sheet before dying again. This one did not carry my old employee ID or my old plant code. It carried Troy's current supervisor approval line and Bry's washed-down initials already printed into the sign-off field, as if the plant had decided to widen the choice and spread the weight. That mattered more than anything else because it proved the final lesson. The extra one was not only trying to trap me through my old wound anymore, it was trying to become a shared practical problem, the kind groups solve by compromise. Troy folded the sheet without reading it twice and slid it into the red drawer. Then he locked the drawer with the little brass key on his ring. At 3:18 a.m., the line stopped completely. Not a hum left in the release chain, not a wheel ticking down, nothing. The silence that follows industrial motion is never true silence. Refrigeration still worked. Vents still washed air. Somewhere down a corridor, a drain still carried water. But compared to the line, The room felt hollowed out. The extra one hung dead still at release in that silence. Blank tag facing us. No visible weight shift anywhere above or below it. Then the cold room door opened for the last time. The colder air came out first. Then the voice. Not Troy, not my old supervisor, not me. A younger man's voice this time, uncertain and trying not to sound weak. The kind of voice that asks a more experienced worker whether something looks right before he commits to the wrong move. I knew that voice too. It was the new guy from my old plant who had watched the sanitation argument start and later told management he thought the line had looked fine. He said one sentence, "If it's at release, shouldn't somebody sign it? No accusation." That was what made it so bad. Just normal bad logic spoken aloud. I almost answered him, not because I wanted to justify myself, because I wanted to correct the sentence. That was the old reflex again, the one that says, if language is wrong, maybe the room can still be saved by tightening it up. Troy got there before I did. He said into the open cold room, "No, just that. One word. Flat, quiet, and not addressed to the past, or to the plant, or to the young man who had once failed me. Just no." The effect was immediate and ugly. The cold room door slammed hard enough to shake the station glass. The extra one on the line jerked once as if something upstream had pulled it and lost the grip. Then the overhead chain above release snapped backward 2 inches, settled, and the blank tag tore clean off the hanger and fluttered down onto the wet concrete. When I looked back up, the rail space where the extra one had been hanging was empty. Not moved down line, not moved back. Empty. The count sheet on the desk, still unresolved, now matched the visible line without anyone touching the numbers. No one spoke for a few seconds after that. You would think a room would feel victorious when the impossible thing in it finally lost its place. It does not. It feels tired and suspicious, and a little ashamed of how close it came to helping. Bree picked the fallen blank tag up with 2 gloved fingers and laid it face down on the steel table beside the others. Troy unlocked the red drawer, checked the folded papers once without opening them, then relocked it and put the brass key in his pocket. The station board stayed dark. The printers stayed off. We all understood the same thing without saying it. The plant had backed off because there was nothing left to anchor the extra one into daylight, except ordinary people doing ordinary paperwork, and we had denied it that much. At 3:41 a.m., the manager came down in person, looking angry enough to sound brave. He asked why the board was down, why the line status was unresolved, and why nobody had called him when release stopped making sense. Troy told him the line had corrected without sign-off, and the night paperwork would stay in the drawer until after sunrise. The manager hated that answer because it left him with no clean authority angle. He could not discipline us for a false clear that had never been made. He could not force a sign-off on a thing no one would formally admit was still there. He asked to see the drawer. Troy said no. That was one of the best moments in the whole story because it showed me something I had not seen enough of in my old life. Sometimes the only way to keep a bad institution from eating your work is to deny it the version of the work it can process. The manager swore, paced once, then left to wait for first shift and daylight and other people he could lean on more easily. He never opened the drawer that night. By 4:22 a.m., the plant had gone back to the ugly, ordinary sounds of a real building. Vents, distant forklifts, washdown hoses, No wrong motion in the rails. We brought the board back up just before dawn. The count was clean. Section B matched. Release was empty. And on the steel table, every blank tag we had face down over the night now lay perfectly blank on both sides. Morning in that plant felt more fraudulent than comforting, but I took it anyway. Outside, the parking lot was gray with frost, and the town beyond the yard lights looked small enough to fit in one tired hand. I turned in my radio before anyone could talk me into one more shift. Troy did not try. He only handed me the brass key from the red drawer and told me to keep it until he texted for it back. I asked why. He said because if I ever worked another plant night and saw the count go wrong by one, I would need to know whether the next supervisor had a drawer or only a speech. That line stayed with me longer than anything else in Iowa. Bree gave me a nod on the way out and said not every extra one wants blood, and not every worker gets ruined by the dramatic version. Some only get worn down into helping. I drove out after sunrise with the key in my pocket and the smell of bleach still in my clothes, more tired than scared, which is how the worst jobs usually leave you. 3 weeks later, I was in a grocery store outside Des Moines buying coffee and frozen food because day jobs had started fitting me better again. The meat cooler doors ran the length of the back wall, all glass and printed labels, neat rows under bright white light. I reached for a family pack of pork shoulder and noticed the package beside it had no weight line printed. That by itself was not enough. Printer glitches happen everywhere. Then I saw the lot code under the store label. Same duplicate code that had shown up on 2 different sheets in the plant on the last night. For 1 second, the whole aisle seemed to step back and let that one little white label sit closer to me than anything else in the cooler. I did not take the package. I did not ask a clerk to fix it. I did not even read the label twice. I set my basket down, backed away from the cooler, and left the store with nothing but the coffee. On the drive home, I realized my hands were steady. That was the closest thing to peace the plant ever gave me. I had finally learned that some bad counts do not need correction. They need one decent worker to leave them unresolved.